Some people measure wealth by the size of a bank account. Others measure it by the number of things money can never buy. The ballroom of Whitmore International Tower shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than most American homes. Every polished marble floor reflected tailored tuxedos, elegant evening gowns, and the quiet confidence of people who had spent their lives believing success could be counted in stocks, skyscrapers, and private jets. Waiters moved gracefully between clusters of executives carrying silver trays filled with sparkling water and champagne while a string quartet played softly from the grand staircase. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline glowed beneath the fading light of an autumn evening. Inside, nearly 500 guests gathered for one reason. Charlotte Whitmore had promised a reward unlike anything the city had seen. Standing confidently beneath the enormous Whitmore Foundation emblem, Charlotte looked every bit the daughter of America's most respected billionaire. At 31, she carried herself with calm authority, dressed in an elegant navy evening gown that reflected both sophistication and restraint. She raised a microphone, and the conversation slowly disappeared. 3 days ago, she began, I believed something priceless had been lost forever. The audience leaned closer. Inside a simple leather portfolio were confidential documents that could have changed the future of our company. There was also something far more valuable to my family. She paused just long enough for curiosity to settle over the room. My mother's wedding ring. A quiet murmur spread across the ballroom. Charlotte smiled gently before continuing. Whoever returned both items without taking a single page or touching a single piece of jewelry will receive a reward of $1 million. Cameras immediately turned toward the ballroom entrance as the massive oak doors slowly opened. Some expected a respected attorney. Others whispered about a private investigator or perhaps an off-duty police officer. Instead, an older maintenance supervisor stepped quietly into the room beside a man wearing freshly pressed gray custodial clothes. His name tag simply read Ethan Brooks. Several guests exchanged puzzled glances. One executive frowned. Another quietly laughed into his drink. Someone whispered, "The janitor?" Ethan walked across the polished floor without hurrying. His shoes were spotless despite years of walking endless hallways. His shoulders remained relaxed, his eyes calm, carrying none of the nervous excitement everyone expected from someone about to become a millionaire. Charlotte stepped forward holding an envelope prepared by the foundation's legal team. "Mr. Brooks," she said warmly, "because of your honesty, my family would like to thank you." She extended the envelope toward him. Every phone in the room lifted another inch. Every camera focused. Ethan looked at the envelope only briefly before meeting Charlotte's eyes. There was kindness in his expression, but not temptation. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, his steady voice somehow carrying through the silent ballroom, "those things already belong to you." Charlotte blinked. "Please," she replied. "You earned this." Ethan offered the smallest smile. "No, ma'am." The room became perfectly still. Doing the right thing shouldn't come with a price tag. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Charlotte remained frozen, still holding the envelope between them. Ethan gently folded her fingers back around it. "Keep it," he said. "Someone else probably needs it more than I do." No applause came. No whisper followed. For several endless seconds, some of the wealthiest people in America stood speechless as the poorest man in the room quietly reminded them what real wealth looked like. Charlotte Whitmore remained exactly where she stood long after Ethan Brooks quietly disappeared through the ballroom doors. The envelope containing $1 million still rested in her hands, untouched, suddenly feeling far heavier than paper ever should. Around her, conversations slowly returned, but they no longer carried the easy confidence they had only moments before. Executives who spent entire careers negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions struggled to explain why a maintenance worker had calmly walked away from enough money to transform his life overnight. One senior investor forced a laugh. "It is probably some kind of publicity stunt." Another nodded too quickly. Maybe he wants something bigger later. Charlotte listened without responding. Neither explanation sounded true. She had watched Ethan's face from only a few feet away. There had been no calculation. No hesitation. No performance. Only peace. Later that evening, after the final guests had departed and the ballroom lights dimmed one section at a time, Charlotte found herself standing alone beside the panoramic windows overlooking the city. Thousands of headlights crawled along the expressway below like tiny rivers of light, each carrying someone home after another ordinary day. She wondered where Ethan Brooks was going. Certainly not to a mansion. Certainly not to a luxury penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. She could not explain why the question refused to leave her mind. Meanwhile, several miles away, Ethan parked his 12-year-old blue pickup truck in front of a modest brick duplex on a quiet residential street where children still rode bicycles until sunset and neighbors waved from front porches. The porch light flickered as soon as he stepped out carrying a small paper grocery bag. Before he reached the front door, it swung open. Dad. 16-year-old Lily Brooks hurried outside wearing a faded college sweatshirt and thick wool socks despite the mild evening. Her smile appeared effortlessly, the kind that had survived years of disappointment without losing its warmth. "You are late," she said with gentle concern. Ethan smiled. There was a company event. She noticed the tired look in his eyes before taking the grocery bag from his hands. "Did they at least feed you?" He chuckled softly. "Enough to keep me alive." Inside, their home was simple but spotless. Family photographs lined the hallway. Most featured only two people smiling through birthdays, county fairs, school concerts, and Christmas mornings. One older picture included a woman whose gentle eyes matched Lily's almost perfectly. Fresh vegetable soup simmered slowly on the stove, filling the small kitchen with the comforting scent of rosemary and garlic. Lily placed 2 bowls on the worn oak table. "I saved dinner." Ethan washed his hands before joining her. They bowed their heads for a brief prayer, something they had quietly done every evening since Lily was little. During dinner she talked excitedly about her upcoming science competition and a college scholarship interview scheduled for the following month. Ethan listened carefully, asking questions, remembering every detail, never once mentioning the ballroom, the cameras, or the fortune he had refused only an hour earlier. Across town, Charlotte sat inside her office overlooking the sleeping city. Instead of reviewing quarterly reports, she opened the employee database. Ethan Brooks. Custodial services. 7 years with Whitmore International. Perfect attendance. No disciplinary actions. No emergency hardship requests. No complaints. No promotions. Almost nothing else. Charlotte frowned. A man who could refuse $1 million should have left behind some extraordinary story. Yet according to the company records, he was almost invisible. She leaned back slowly, staring at his employee identification photograph. For the first time in many years, the daughter of one of America's richest men realized she knew almost everything about successful people, but almost nothing about truly honorable ones. The following morning arrived wrapped in pale October sunlight that spilled across the glass walls of Whitmore International Tower, turning steel and concrete into ribbons of gold. Employees streamed through the revolving doors carrying coffee cups, laptops, and conversations about meetings, deadlines, and market forecasts. Almost no one noticed the quiet man pushing a custodial cart toward the east elevator before sunrise. Ethan Brooks greeted the overnight security officer with the same warm smile he offered every morning. "Good morning, Frank." The older guard smiled back. "Morning, Ethan. Beautiful day. Every day is, if you decide it is." Frank chuckled softly as Ethan continued down the hallway, polishing fingerprints from glass doors that would be covered again within the hour. Nearly everyone walked past without looking twice. A few nodded politely. Most simply hurried toward another busy workday. 3 floors above, Charlotte Whitmore stood inside her office watching the lobby through the security monitor instead of reviewing financial reports. She watched Ethan refill the lobby coffee station after noticing it was empty before anyone complained. She watched him quietly straighten a crooked welcome sign without expecting praise. When an elderly delivery driver struggled with several heavy boxes, Ethan immediately stepped forward, carrying every package inside before returning to his cleaning cart as though helping people was simply another task on his schedule. Charlotte picked up the office phone. "Megan, could you come in for a moment?" Her executive assistant entered carrying a tablet. "Yes, Miss Whitmore?" Charlotte kept her eyes on the security screen. "Tell me about Ethan Brooks." Megan looked surprised. "Our janitor?" Charlotte nodded. "Everything you know." Megan thought for several seconds before answering. "Honestly, almost nothing. Everyone likes him. He never complains. Never misses work. Last winter he spent an entire Saturday helping facilities repair a burst water pipe even though it was not his shift." Charlotte looked up. "Was he paid overtime?" Megan checked her tablet. "No. He declined it." Charlotte frowned again. Another quiet refusal. Another decision that made no financial sense. "What about friends?" Megan shrugged. "He eats lunch outside when the weather is nice. Usually alone, although people often stop to talk with him. He remembers everyone's names. Birthdays too. Last month he bought cupcakes for the mailroom staff because one of them was celebrating 20 years with the company." Charlotte slowly leaned back in her chair. "Who authorized that?" Megan blinked. "He paid for them himself." After her assistant left, Charlotte walked downstairs without informing security. She found Ethan exactly where Megan had described, sitting alone on a wooden bench in the small employee courtyard. His lunch consisted of a homemade turkey sandwich, an apple, and a reusable bottle of water. A pair of sparrows hopped cautiously near his feet. Ethan broke off tiny pieces of bread, smiling as the birds carried them away. There was something strangely peaceful about the scene. No audience. No cameras. No performance. Only quiet kindness offered where no reward could possibly follow. Charlotte remained hidden behind a row of maple trees, uncertain why she did not simply introduce herself. Before she could decide, a young intern rushed into the courtyard carrying folders that suddenly slipped from his arms. Dozens of papers scattered across the brick walkway. The intern sighed in frustration. Without saying a word, Ethan set aside his lunch and knelt to gather every page before the afternoon breeze could carry them away. "Thank you," the embarrassed young man said. "I am sorry for interrupting your break." Ethan handed him the neatly organized folders with an easy smile. "People are always more important than schedules." The intern hurried away. Ethan returned to his bench and quietly finished the now cold sandwich as though nothing unusual had happened. Charlotte stood perfectly still. She had spent her entire career studying leadership, negotiation, and success. Yet the most valuable lesson she had witnessed all week came from a man whose office was a supply closet and whose greatest habit seemed to be helping people when no one was watching. The days passed quietly, but Charlotte Whitmore found herself noticing things she had somehow overlooked for years. Every morning before most employees arrived, Ethan Brooks was already walking the corridors with steady, unhurried steps, leaving every hallway brighter than he had found it. Every evening, long after executives hurried home to expensive dinners and private clubs, he was still there, making certain the building would welcome another day with the same quiet dignity. The more she observed him, the less she understood him. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Charlotte made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of sending another formal letter of appreciation, she walked to the maintenance department carrying a simple white envelope. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no members of the executive board. She wanted to thank him as one human being to another. Ethan was replacing the air filter inside a conference room when she found him standing on a small ladder with a toolbox resting beside him. He climbed down as soon as he noticed her. "Good afternoon, Miss Whitmore." "Good afternoon, Mr. Brooks." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the ventilation system filled the silence. Charlotte held out the envelope. "This is not the reward from the gala." Ethan looked at it but did not reach for it. "Then what is it?" "A personal thank you." She smiled gently. "Inside is a gift certificate to a local grocery store. Nothing extravagant. I simply thought it might help." Ethan's expression remained warm, but he slowly folded his hands in front of him. "That is thoughtful of you." Charlotte relaxed slightly. "Then please accept it." Ethan shook his head almost imperceptibly. "I cannot." She blinked in surprise. "Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because gratitude should never feel like a transaction." Charlotte searched his face, expecting pride or stubbornness. She found neither. "You returned something precious to my family," she said quietly. "Allow me to return a small kindness." Ethan smiled with the same calm sincerity she remembered from the ballroom. "You already have." She looked confused. "How?" "You thanked me yourself instead of sending someone else." Charlotte lowered the envelope slightly. Ethan continued, his voice carrying the peaceful confidence of someone who had long ago settled what truly mattered. "People often believe appreciation must be expensive. Sometimes respect is worth much more." Before Charlotte could respond, the conference room door opened. A young accountant stepped inside carrying a laptop and looked embarrassed. "Mr. Brooks, I am sorry to bother you again, but the printer on the 7th floor stopped working before our client meeting." Ethan nodded immediately. "I will be there in just a minute." The accountant smiled with obvious relief. "Thank you." As the young man disappeared, Charlotte noticed something unexpected. Ethan was never interrupted because people looked down on him. He was interrupted because everyone trusted him. From every corner of the building, employees sought his help with problems both large and small. He never sounded impatient. Never reminded anyone that it was not part of his job. Never made another person feel like an inconvenience. Charlotte quietly slipped the unopened envelope back into her purse. "Mr. Brooks," she asked softly, "has anyone ever told you that you make ordinary moments feel important?" Ethan chuckled gently while picking up his toolbox. "Life is mostly ordinary moments, Miss Whitmore. If we do not treat them with care, we spend our lives waiting for something that was already happening." He excused himself and walked toward the elevator without another word, leaving Charlotte standing alone in the empty conference room. Through the glass wall she watched employees greet him by name as he passed, each exchange lasting only seconds but somehow leaving smiles behind. For the first time since inheriting executive responsibility, Charlotte began to wonder whether the strongest person inside Whitmore International was not the one occupying the top floor, but the quiet man who carried a toolbox through every floor below. By the following Monday, subtle changes had begun to ripple through Whitmore International Tower, although few people could explain why. Charlotte Whitmore no longer hurried through the lobby surrounded by assistants and security. Instead, she slowed her pace, greeting receptionists by name, thanking maintenance workers for their efforts, and occasionally stopping to ask employees how their families were doing. Some welcomed the change. Others assumed it was another corporate initiative that would quietly disappear within a few weeks. Ethan Brooks noticed the difference, but he never mentioned it. He simply continued polishing floors, repairing loose door handles, and offering the same quiet smile to everyone who crossed his path. Not everyone appreciated the growing attention surrounding the humble janitor. During a lunch break in the executive dining area, several department managers gathered around a corner table overlooking the city. One of them laughed while stirring his coffee. "I still cannot believe the famous janitor turned down $1 million." Another manager smirked. People love playing the hero when they know everyone is watching. A third shrugged. Give him enough attention and he will ask for a promotion sooner or later. Nobody is that selfless. Their conversation continued with comfortable certainty until an unfamiliar silence settled over the table. Charlotte had approached without anyone noticing. She looked calmly from one executive to another before speaking. Tell me something. No one answered. How many of you have ever refused something valuable because it was simply the right thing to do? The managers exchanged uncertain glances. One attempted a nervous smile. Miss Whitmore, we were only joking. Charlotte remained composed. Character is often revealed through jokes. Her words were quiet, but they carried enough weight to erase every smile around the table. You assume Mr. Brooks wanted recognition because that is what many people would want. Have any of you considered that he simply meant what he said? No one replied. Charlotte continued. He has worked in this building for 7 years. During that time, he has asked this company for nothing except the opportunity to do honest work. Perhaps we should spend less time questioning his motives and more time examining our own. With that, she picked up her lunch tray and walked away, leaving behind a table full of executives who suddenly found their meals less satisfying than before. Word of the conversation spread through the building before the afternoon ended. Employees whispered in elevators, break rooms, and hallways. Most were surprised that the company's future leader had publicly defended someone whose job title many people barely noticed. Ethan remained completely unaware. That afternoon he was helping a new employee locate the Human Resources office after she became lost on her first day. When she thanked him repeatedly, Ethan simply smiled. Everyone is new somewhere. As they walked together, they passed Charlotte near the central atrium. She watched quietly as Ethan patiently answered every question the nervous young woman asked, pointing out departments, introducing her to reception staff, and making certain she no longer felt alone inside the enormous building. Once the employee disappeared toward orientation, Charlotte approached him. You seem to know everyone. Ethan gave a small laugh. Not everyone. It feels that way. He adjusted the strap on his tool bag before answering. People remember those who remember them first. Charlotte considered those words carefully. You make that sound easy. Ethan looked toward the busy lobby where hundreds of employees crossed paths without seeing one another. Most people are carrying something invisible, he said softly. A worry. A disappointment. A hope. Being kind rarely fixes their problems, but sometimes it reminds them they do not have to carry everything alone. Charlotte followed his gaze across the bustling lobby. For years she had seen payroll numbers, organizational charts, and quarterly performance reports. Ethan seemed to see fathers trying to provide for their children, mothers balancing careers and family, young graduates chasing dreams, and older workers quietly finishing honorable careers. As the afternoon sunlight poured through the towering windows, Charlotte realized something that no business school had ever taught her. Leadership did not begin inside the boardroom. Sometimes it quietly began with remembering another person's name. That evening, after most of the office lights had faded into darkness, Charlotte Whitmore remained alone inside her father's old executive office. The city stretched beyond the windows like a sea of quiet stars, but her attention rested on a thin employee file lying open across the mahogany desk. It still bothered her that a man who had quietly influenced so many lives seemed to leave almost no trace on paper. There had to be more. She pressed the intercom. Megan, would you mind checking the archived employment records? I am looking for anything connected to Ethan Brooks before he joined our company. 20 minutes later, Megan returned carrying a faded storage folder that had been retrieved from an off-site archive. This was attached to his original application, she explained. Human Resources never digitized the supporting documents. Charlotte thanked her and waited until the office was quiet again before opening the folder. The first page was an old resume. She expected to find previous custodial positions or maintenance work. Instead, her eyes widened. Ethan Brooks. Mechanical engineer. Master of Science in Industrial Systems Engineering. 15 years of experience designing large commercial building infrastructure. Lead engineer on award-winning energy efficiency projects across Illinois and Wisconsin. Holder of multiple engineering certifications. Charlotte slowly lowered the papers, certain she had misread something. She looked again. The credentials were authentic. The recommendations came from respected engineering firms. Several letters praised Ethan's leadership, integrity, and uncommon ability to solve complex problems while putting people first. One former executive had written, "If every company had one Ethan Brooks, every company would become stronger." Charlotte whispered to herself, "How does a man with this background become a janitor?" She continued reading until she reached a newspaper clipping carefully folded inside the folder. It was more than a decade old. The article described a rising engineering leader whose promising career had unexpectedly ended after the sudden illness of his wife, Emily Brooks. According to the article, Ethan had resigned from a prestigious position only weeks after her passing, declining several lucrative offers from competing firms. There were no scandals. No lawsuits. No professional failures. Only one brief sentence near the end caught Charlotte's attention. Friends say Brooks chose a position with flexible hours so he could raise his young daughter himself. Charlotte closed her eyes for a long moment. Suddenly every quiet smile, every humble answer, every refused reward made sense. Ethan had not fallen from success. He had walked away from it. Not because he lacked ambition, but because someone he loved needed him more than another promotion ever could. The following afternoon, Charlotte happened to pass the employee parking lot just as Ethan finished his shift. She remained inside her car without being noticed. Ethan opened the passenger door of his aging pickup truck, placing a backpack inside before driving across town. Curious but respectful, Charlotte followed from several cars behind, keeping a careful distance. Ethan eventually pulled into the parking lot of a community college. Moments later, Lily hurried out of the science building carrying textbooks against her chest. The moment she spotted her father, her entire face brightened. Ethan stepped out of the truck and accepted the heavy books without being asked. Father and daughter laughed about something Charlotte could not hear before stopping at a nearby food truck for 2 simple dinners. They sat together at a picnic table beneath strings of warm lights, talking, smiling, and sharing fries as though they had all the riches in the world. There were no luxury cars. No expensive restaurants. No designer clothes. Yet Charlotte had never seen a family look more complete. As Ethan listened attentively while Lily spoke about her classes, Charlotte quietly turned off her engine and watched from across the street. For the first time in many years, the daughter of a billionaire understood that sacrifice was not the opposite of success. Sometimes it was the purest definition of it. The first snow of the season arrived earlier than anyone expected, dusting downtown Chicago in a thin layer of white that softened the city's endless lines of steel and glass. Inside Whitmore International Tower, the lobby buzzed with the usual rhythm of another busy weekday. Employees hurried toward elevators carrying steaming coffee cups while clients checked their watches before morning meetings. Ethan Brooks quietly finished polishing the marble entrance just as the first wave of visitors stepped inside. He greeted each person with the same gentle smile, holding doors open for strangers who barely noticed his name tag. High above the lobby, Charlotte Whitmore was presenting the company's annual sustainability initiative to investors gathered inside the Executive Conference Center. Her presentation flowed confidently until the lights flickered once. Then twice. A faint murmur spread through the room. Within seconds, every screen went dark. The heating system stopped humming. Elevators froze between floors. Emergency lights glowed dimly across every hallway as the building settled into an unfamiliar silence. Someone whispered, "Power outage." Another executive immediately reached for a phone that no longer had a signal inside the reinforced conference room. Charlotte remained composed, but she recognized something was wrong. The backup systems should have activated instantly. Instead, only portions of the building were receiving emergency power. Down in the mechanical level, Ethan had already set his cleaning supplies aside. Years of engineering experience quietly awakened beneath the calm expression he always carried. He studied the emergency control panel for only a few seconds before understanding what had happened. An unexpected surge from the aging transfer switch had interrupted communication between the primary electrical feed and the backup generator. It was not dangerous, but if left unresolved, hundreds of employees could remain stranded in dark offices for hours. Frank, the security officer, hurried into the mechanical room. Ethan, maintenance is still 20 minutes away. We cannot reach the engineering contractor. Ethan nodded calmly. Open the equipment room for me. Frank hesitated. Are you sure? Ethan offered the same reassuring smile he always did. I have seen this system before. Without wasting another second, he carefully inspected the emergency controls, reading indicator lights one by one rather than rushing. He spoke quietly to the security team, assigning simple tasks with remarkable clarity. Please keep everyone away from this corridor. Have someone notify the elevators that power should return shortly. Tell reception everything is under control. There was no panic in his voice, and because there was none in him, there was none in those around him. Upstairs, Charlotte had already guided the investors toward the emergency stairwell when the building suddenly came alive again. One floor after another brightened. Computers restarted. Elevators reset. Warm air flowed once more through the ventilation system. Around the tower, relieved applause broke out as employees returned to work. In the control room, the chief maintenance supervisor rushed in, breathing heavily after fighting traffic through the snow. He stared at the restored system in disbelief. Who fixed the transfer sequence? Frank pointed quietly toward Ethan, who was already wiping grease from his hands with an old shop towel before placing every borrowed tool neatly back where it belonged. He did. The supervisor looked stunned. That procedure is not even in the maintenance manual anymore. Ethan simply smiled. The older systems were built differently. Before anyone could ask another question, he picked up his custodial cart. The lobby floor will be wet from the snow, he said. People could slip if I leave it too long. He walked away before anyone thanked him. Several minutes later, Charlotte entered the mechanical room after hearing what had happened. She found only the supervisor and Frank discussing the restored equipment. Where is Mr. Brooks? She asked. Frank glanced toward the lobby security monitor. Ethan was already placing bright yellow caution signs near the entrance while quietly handing paper towels to a little boy who had spilled hot chocolate across his winter coat. Charlotte watched the screen without speaking. The man who had just solved a problem that protected an entire skyscraper had returned, without the slightest trace of pride, to cleaning melted snow from the floor before someone else could fall. News traveled through Whitmore International Tower faster than the falling snow outside. By the next morning, everyone knew that the quiet custodian had restored critical building systems before outside engineers even reached the property. Some employees called it luck. Others insisted he must have received help. But the chief maintenance supervisor settled every rumor with a single sentence during the weekly operations meeting. No one told Ethan Brooks what to do. He understood that system better than the people who designed our current maintenance plan. Charlotte Whitmore listened from the end of the conference table without saying a word. She had already made her decision. 2 days later, every employee received an invitation to a special company gathering in the main atrium. The announcement described it as a celebration of dedication and service. Few people knew the real reason. By late afternoon, hundreds of employees filled the open lobby beneath the towering glass ceiling. Holiday decorations had begun appearing throughout the building, and white lights reflected softly against polished marble floors. Ethan arrived carrying a small toolbox, assuming another maintenance request had been reported. Frank smiled as soon as he saw him. "I think this one is for you." Ethan looked confused. Before he could ask another question, Charlotte stepped onto the small presentation platform. Her father, Richard Whitmore, stood beside her for the first time in months. Although age had softened his posture, his presence still commanded quiet respect throughout the company. Charlotte welcomed everyone before turning toward Ethan. "Mr. Brooks, would you please join us?" A ripple of applause spread through the crowd as Ethan slowly approached the stage, looking far more comfortable repairing machinery than standing before hundreds of people. Richard Whitmore extended his hand. "I have wanted to meet you properly." Ethan shook it politely. "It is an honor, sir." Richard smiled. "No. The honor belongs to us." He turned toward the audience. "For many years, I believed buildings were held together by steel, concrete, and careful investments. This week, one man reminded me they are held together by people with integrity." The applause grew louder. Richard continued, "Mr. Brooks returned priceless family property without accepting a reward. He quietly solved a problem that protected our company. More importantly, he has demonstrated extraordinary character every single day without expecting recognition." Charlotte stepped forward holding another envelope. "On behalf of my family and Whitmore International, we would like to offer you a $1 million award, along with a leadership position within our facilities division." Every eye turned toward Ethan. The room became so still that the soft hum of the heating system seemed unusually loud. Ethan accepted neither envelope nor applause. He looked first at Charlotte, then at Richard, before speaking with the same quiet sincerity that had first silenced the ballroom weeks earlier. "Your generosity means more than I can express." He paused gently. "But I cannot accept the money." A wave of astonishment swept across the atrium. Richard studied him carefully. "May I ask why?" Ethan nodded. "Because I already have enough." Several employees lowered their eyes. Ethan continued. "I have a daughter who comes home safely every evening. Honest work that lets me sleep peacefully at night. Friends I did not know I had until this week. That is more wealth than many people ever find." Charlotte felt tears gathering but remained silent. Ethan looked across the crowd toward the housekeeping team standing quietly near the back. "If you truly wish to honor me, may I ask for something else?" Richard smiled warmly. "Anything." Ethan answered without hesitation. "Please improve the health benefits for every custodial employee and maintenance worker in this company. Some of them are raising children. Some are caring for aging parents. They deserve to know someone sees them." Silence settled across the enormous lobby once again. This time it was not surprise alone. It was the unmistakable sound of hundreds of hearts quietly realizing that the richest request made that afternoon had not been for one man, but for everyone standing beside him. Winter settled gently over Chicago, and with it came changes that no quarterly report could have predicted. True to Richard Whitmore's promise, Whitmore International introduced expanded health benefits for every custodial employee, maintenance technician, and building support worker before the new year began. The announcement was met with quiet tears, grateful embraces, and countless phone calls made during lunch breaks to spouses and parents who suddenly found one less burden to carry. Few people knew the change had begun with a single request from a man who had asked for nothing for himself. Ethan Brooks returned to work the following Monday exactly as he always had. His gray uniform remained neatly pressed. His custodial cart rolled through the hallways before sunrise. The only visible difference was that people now greeted him before he greeted them. Executives who once hurried past him now stopped to shake his hand. Young interns sought his advice. Even visiting clients noticed something unusual about the atmosphere inside the building. Respect no longer seemed reserved for corner offices. It had quietly become part of the culture. One afternoon, Charlotte Whitmore found Ethan replacing fresh flowers in the lobby, carefully arranging them after the florist had delivered the weekly display. She smiled as she walked beside him. "I have another offer." Ethan laughed softly without looking up. "Should I be worried?" "Not this time." She handed him a single folder instead of an envelope. "There is no money inside." Ethan opened it slowly. It contained an invitation to become Senior Facilities Operations Advisor, a role designed specifically to improve building systems, mentor maintenance teams, and help train future managers. The schedule was flexible enough that he could continue supporting Lily through college, and the position recognized both his engineering background and his years of practical experience. Ethan read every page before quietly closing the folder. "You listened," he said. Charlotte nodded. "You taught me that titles should follow character, not the other way around." Ethan remained silent for a moment, looking through the lobby windows where fresh snow drifted peacefully across the sidewalks. "I can accept this," he finally said. "Not because it is a promotion, but because it allows me to serve people in a different way." Charlotte smiled with unmistakable relief. "Then we are honored to have you." Several months later, spring returned to the city. Trees along Michigan Avenue filled with fresh green leaves, and sunlight once again poured through the towering glass walls of Whitmore International. Lily Brooks stood proudly on a college stage accepting a prestigious engineering scholarship sponsored anonymously by the Whitmore Foundation. As she searched the audience, she found her father smiling from the front row beside Charlotte and Richard Whitmore. No speeches were necessary. No explanations were offered. Some moments spoke more clearly through quiet gratitude than words ever could. After the ceremony ended, Ethan and Charlotte walked slowly across the campus courtyard while students celebrated with their families all around them. Charlotte looked toward the blue sky before breaking the comfortable silence. "When I first met you, I believed I was trying to reward an honest man." Ethan glanced at her with gentle curiosity. She smiled. "Instead, you changed the way I measure success." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Money builds buildings. Character builds the people inside them." Charlotte nodded, knowing she would remember those words for the rest of her life. They continued walking beneath rows of flowering trees without another sentence, because not every meaningful ending requires applause. Sometimes the greatest miracles arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary people who choose integrity when no one expects it, kindness when no one demands it, and humility when the whole world offers them a reason to choose otherwise. And in the end, the wealthiest hearts are never the ones that hold the most, but the ones that give away the very things money could never buy.